The information in this recording is general in nature and should not be considered personal advice. Please consult a professional and qualified financial advisor to discuss how this information may apply to your personal circumstances. Thanks for listening. Hi, Dane here from Own Financial Planning, and joining me again today is Tom Wickenden, investment strategist with Betashares. So Tom, today we're talking about the Australian resources sector. So are you able to share with us what are some of the components that make up the Australian resources industry?
Yeah, of course. Great to be here with you again today, Dane. Look, the Australian resources sector, it's one of the most important sectors for the Australian economy. Within the sector itself, it is dominated by a few large players. It's fair to say we've obviously got BHP, which is a global resources powerhouse. We've also got large companies like Rio Tinto and Woodside Energy. Now, despite those few large companies being in the sector, it is actually also the most diversified sector in the Australian market or on the ASX, with around 47 companies within the sector itself.
Yeah, right. And as we sort of conduct this discussion, just closing off on the 2024 financial year, it's been a relatively subdued year for resources. So what's been some of the main drivers of that?
Yeah, it's fair to say it's been a subdued year. It was the biggest detractor from the Australian market in the 2024 financial year. But in saying that, it detracted less than 1%. So the whole Aussie market did fairly well. Materials just did a bit worse than everyone else. Given that top-heavy nature of the market, it was ultimately BHP, which has a large weight but had a small negative performance, which led to probably an outsized amount of the negative contribution, as well as Woodside Energy. But in saying that, given that dispersion I mentioned, or the breadth of the sector, we actually saw about a 160% difference between the top performer and the bottom performer in the sector. So it's quite diverse, quite dispersed.
Sure. And I guess within that, what are some of the opportunities that you see over the next sort of year or so for this sector?
Just recently in the US, we saw a third straight soft CPI print. And on the back of that, we saw a bit of a rotation within US equities. We saw rotation from large caps to smaller caps, and importantly, to cyclical companies as well. I think as markets start to factor in and start to really come to terms with the fact that the Fed is likely to cut rates this year, and hopefully Australia early next year, how will that play out in markets? Well, we'll likely start pricing in the next cyclical recovery. As interest rates come down, hopefully there's stronger economic growth, hopefully more cyclical acceleration. And that could be very positive, of course, for global resources and Australian resources as a beneficiary.
Talk to me a little bit about QRE, Betashares' Australian Resources ETF. Sort of what's its objective and what's made up of the portfolio?
Yeah, so QRE is a great access tool. It gives investors a really simple way to access the Australian resources sector through purchasing a single ETF. The ETF holds all of the companies within the ASX 200 that fall within that resources sector classification. The fee for the fund is 34 basis points, so you're talking $34 for every 10,000 invested per annum, which is very economical, and just a great tool for access for investors.
And what role do you typically see QRE playing in investor portfolios?
Yeah, look, similar to our financial sector ETF within the Australian market, we either see investors use it as a core building block. If you're building a core Australian portfolio from scratch, you could just use this ETF for your resources exposure, or very commonly we see it used as a tactical exposure, a way to get a simple upweight to the Australian resources sector.
Fantastic. Some great insights, Tom. Thank you very much. And if you want to learn a little bit more about how we utilise QRE in our asset allocation strategies, you can contact us at ownfinancialplanning.com.au. Thanks for listening.